From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
On the final day of the Pro Farmer Crop Tour, scouts surveyed fields battling high heat and drought conditions. But that's not all.
Ears are starting to drop from the heat and the dryness here in Iowa, but scouts may be more concerned about the soybeans. We'll tell you why coming up today on AgDay.
And there isn't much better news in the West.
I'm Michelle Rourke on the western leg of the Pro Farmer Crop Tour, where heat and drought stress came together this year.
As reality sets in,
this is drying down. The crop we saw just a few stops ago there, that's dying down.
The 2023 Pro Farmer Crop Tour wraps up right now on AgDay.
AgDay, presented by Pioneer. What's next happens when the name on the cap matches the power of one's purpose. Pioneer. What's next happens here.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Concerns grew on the last day of the Pro Farmer Crop Tour as temperatures continue to rise. In Iowa, the second biggest soybean producing state, many scouts wondered whether the crop was either dying or drying out in several fields. Temperatures on Thursday soaring again into the triple digits across the Midwest, but are expected to cool down as we head into the weekend. Now, on top of the heat, drought seems to be building back in. The latest drought monitor putting 32% of the U.S. now in drought, up 2% from last week. Zooming in on the final stops of the tour, Iowa, more than 74% of that state is in drought, with 5% now in extreme drought. Minnesota, where both legs of the tour ended up last night, not faring much better, 72% now in drought. A look at where the drought is focused when it comes to soybeans, the areas shaded there in red, the hardest hit, with 38% of the soybean crop in drought, Iowa there in the bullseye.
Now we're sitting here with going to be 2 or 3 days of 120 degrees heat index. Beans are an August crop, so this crop is not finishing very well.
Corn in drought, also inching up, now 43% in drought, up 1% from last week.
Coverage of the 2023 Pro Farmer Crop Tour is brought to you by Pioneer. Pioneer combines cutting-edge research with one of the largest local testing programs in the industry to help farmers succeed. Pioneer. What's next happens here.
And here are just a couple of examples of what high heat and drought are doing to the corn crop in eastern Iowa. These photos taken by Farm Journal's Tyne Morgan following scouts on the eastern leg as they traveled through that area on Thursday. The tour traveling from Iowa City to Rochester, Minnesota. Tyne joins us now, and Tyne, those areas south of Waterloo are all in extreme drought.
Well, Clinton, now we've traveled north of Waterloo, and as you can see, this area also in drought. But the scouts that we talked to are more concerned about the soybeans than they are the corn, especially considering there's no rain in the forecast. It's the final day of Pro Farmer Crop Tour in the East.
What did I have? 44. 94 years.
And what scouts saw?
It's good corn, but the ear count wasn't very good.
Was an extremely variable crop.
That's what they call that.
Peter Meyer describes this Iowa crop as the most variable and the most mature he's seen in his 17 years of crop tour.
This crop just didn't get enough moisture, and it ran out of energy.
Meyer says while signs of stress are visible, he's actually surprised how well the crop has withstood such little rain.
It's certainly not a disaster by any stretch of the imagination, but when you look at ears at what the potential could have been with some rain, it really could have been a monster.
Field after field, extremely variable is what sums up the crop here.
We get to this time of year, we're looking at yield estimates, trying to understand the productivity in the crop, and this might be as complicated of a year. It's dynamic.
Adding to the complication, the variability that's also showing up in soybeans.
I don't really know if it's SDS or if it's just it's their time to go.
And as you can see, fields of yellow soybeans are just another sign of the challenges eastern Iowa farmers have faced this year.
It's interesting because you'll come upon one field where I would say that maybe 50% of it is this yellow color, and the field is obviously dying.
The pod counts on Meyer's route in Iowa coming in better than what they saw in Illinois.
There certainly are beans in the pods, and they're full beans, but boy, I've just been disappointed all week with the number of pods that I've seen.
But according to area agronomists, pod counts aren't the greatest risk.
It's really more seed size. That really is going to be the penalty now for the next 3 or 4 weeks.
The biggest concern for beans now, not just the heat, but the fact one weather model pointing to no rain in this area until September 8th.
Now we're sitting here with going to be 2 or 3 days of 120 degrees heat index. Beans are an August crop, so this crop is not finishing very well.
Reporting from the eastern leg of Pro Farmer Crop Tour, I'm Tyne Morgan.
The high heat not just reserved for Iowa, but into Minnesota, with the National Weather Service putting out excessive heat warnings for the southern part of the state. AgDay's Michelle Rook joins us from the western leg of the tour on what's its last leg from Spencer, Iowa to Rochester, Minnesota. And Michelle, heat and drought were also impacting crops where you traveled.
Crop scouts here in Minnesota are finding a variable crop due to drought stress and spotty rains, and that will likely mean some yields that are below long-term averages.
There's a lot of 2 bean pods on there. It's a little concerning too, I'd say.
Minnesota farmer Brad Nelson was disappointed with how the day started out in soybean fields in south central counties.
The first 2-3 stops I stopped, the 2 bean pods were very noticeable. In the first one, I counted a plant that had 48 pods on it, and 24 were 2 bean or 1 bean pods, which is, I'd say that's concerning.
Concerning because this area received more rain than other areas. It means a yield hit in his book, and it's a combined result of not just drought, but heat stress.
Well, it's a third less yield, out of that plant almost. Maybe not quite a third, but probably 20-25% anyway.
And there's also a great deal of variability in the crop due to the spottiness of the rains that did fall during the season.
It's been popcorn showers all summer long, so it's made winners and losers in counties.
That will make it tough to get a statewide yield in Minnesota that exceeds long-term averages.
Well, for the state checkoff, we're betting, we took another bushel off, we're betting at 50 bushel beans. I think last year the state was 52.
Scout and Nebraska farmer Tim Gregerson says drought also hit the corn.
It is fired up to one leaf below the ear, and so you can see that there's been, drought stress in here.
Plus, the heat also played a role, and he gauges it by the lack of uniformity, or what he calls bouncy tassels, and the girth of the ears.
But if I can put my hand and touch my middle finger with my thumb on these ears of corn, that means that we don't have the depth there to have a monster yield, okay? This doesn't have the depth of kernel that's going to finish above average this year.
I'm thinking right at crop insurance. This feels like a crop from 2 years ago. On the corn, it was highly variable that year, and we ended up right around crop insurance levels.
And the statewide corn yield is probably headed below historical norms.
It's not bad, but it just doesn't, there's not anything that's really popped out at me to get it above average.
In Minnesota, I'm Michelle Rook reporting for AgDay.
All right, thanks, Michelle. And here's a quick review of the key numbers from day 3 of the tour. In Illinois, scouts reporting an estimated corn yield of 193.7 bushels to the acre. That's up about 1.5% from last year, but just a fraction higher than the average. For soybeans, they counted an average of 1,270.8 pods in a 3 by 3 foot square, again up more than 1.5% over 2022 and just a bit higher than the 3-year average. Full results from Iowa and Minnesota were released last night during Crop Tour Live. You'll find those results posted over at agweb.com. And later today, ProFarmer will release its national production estimates. These numbers are formulated based on the data gathered during Crop Tour, crop maturity, acreage adjustments, along with historical differences between the tour and USDA's yield predictions. You can look for those numbers later today over at agweb.com and on AgDay's social channels. The heat taking its toll on livestock in the Midwest as well. Several outlets reporting cattle dying due to the high heat. In Nebraska, nearly 24 head died earlier this week at a University of Nebraska-Lincoln research farm near Ithaca. Temperatures topping 100 degrees with high humidity lingering through the overnight hours. Now it's hard on larger cattle, especially fats nearing the end of their time on feed. USDA's cattle heat stress map showing that by Sunday, that danger and emergency heat will be relegated back to the southern coastal states, Arizona and California. But as we said earlier, relief is in sight from some of this heat. Meteorologist Andrew Whitmire joins us with an update.
And looking at our temperatures for today and actually going forward into the rest of August, we're going to be watching for some cooler weather finally for parts of the Midwest, Great Lakes states, the Ohio River Valley here as a nice trough begins to work its way through behind a cold front. Meanwhile, that heat, well, it's not going to go away from the entire country. It's going to work its way back off to the west, back around the Rockies and the Four Corners there. You're going to be under the heat dome here once again and continuing as we wrap up the month of August. Looking at temperatures this afternoon, it's easy to tell where the cold front is, way up to the north, right up along the international border. That's going to begin to dive its way southward a touch, and that's again going to shut off that extreme heat for parts of the Great Lakes states here as we round out this Friday. And along that front, as it does begin to drop its way further off towards the south, can't rule out a few isolated stronger storms there from southern Nebraska, northern Kansas, all the way over towards the southern half there of Illinois down towards Indiana, as well as over towards Kansas here as we head on into this Friday. Let's check out our crop photo of the day here, and we've got this one that is making memories. Thanks to Brett Crosby of Wyoming for capturing this moment. He says this is one of the last rides with his son before he left for college. He added he was gonna miss him. A spectacular ride through some amazing country. I'll have more on your Ag Day forecast in just a few.
Soybeans, livestock, even milk finding its way higher on Thursday. We'll zero in on those milk markets coming up next. And later, pageants are one thing, but what about getting your face carved in butter? We'll meet the Minnesota princess sitting for the honor in the country. Class 3 milk prices seeing a bit of a bounce on Thursday. Michelle Rook has more on today's milk market trends in Markets Now.
Welcome to Markets Now. Brian Doherty, Total Farm Marketing, joining us. And Brian, let's talk about the milk market. We've had a nice recovery here, above $18 on the Class 3 fluid price. Is the bottom in? Are we foraging a low?
Well, let's start with some of the components. The butter market has reached its highest this last week, its highest price for the year. So you're almost 9 months into the year, and you've got some real strength on their butter. You've got temperatures that are sticking around and that are hot. That's going to affect some of the Midwestern milk production expectations. That the herd continues to show some decline is certainly supportive as well. And then you're seeing demand in the cheese sector. You're seeing good demand. We saw last week good demand for cheese at higher prices. So the market isn't roaring higher, but it's giving a lot of sign that on dips, the market is finding support. And we saw September milk on strength break out to the top side and quickly reverse some losses from earlier in the week. So you've got a lot of things that are really clicking in the dairy complex right now. I'm sounding really bullish. I'm not that bullish, but we're certainly seeing, I think, the market respond to lower prices. And consequently, we're seeing higher value on the futures months.
Yeah. And have we seen a lot of herd liquidation? Do you think that's going to start showing up here?
Well, the word a lot is all relative. We've seen month to month to month decreases from the year before. We're not seeing the whole herd down drastically. When I say drastically, 1-2%, something like that. But we're seeing a change from increasing numbers that we saw for multiple months. And so it's good to see that the farmers responding, getting rid of cows and you got really good beef prices too. Right. So you're seeing the marketplace respond to, maybe less than perfect cows and heifers that aren't taking, they're out pretty quick. Our producers, it's just the natural course of it. They're getting a little sharper with kind of their temperament to hold animals back, especially with the good beef prices. And the market is showing that.
All right. Thanks for joining us. Brian Doherty, Total Farm Marketing. That's Markets Now, and more Ag Days coming up.
To discuss marketing strategies, call 800-334-9779.
Looking at our active weather here for this Friday, it's going to be situated along a cold front, which will be dropping its way out of the Great Lakes down into the Midwest and even on into the central parts of the plains there. We're going to watch out for a few stronger storms, and where those showers and thunderstorms do decide to kind of pop on up, That's going to really be our only chance of some decent moisture here. And again, we really could use it for parts of the central plain states as well as down into Texas. But again, it's all going to be timely where those showers and thunderstorms do decide to set up here over the course of the next 24 to 48 hours. Looking at a brand new U.S. drought monitor that was released yesterday for Thursday, and we continue to watch kind of central and eastern Texas as parts of San Antonio region now into the exceptional drought, and that further continues to expand there. Really needing the water content, but unfortunately with the lack of any tropical system moving on through right now, that again is keeping things quite dry there for Texas. But hey, tropical activity does usually increase right about now through September, so we'll be watching the Gulf and the Atlantic very closely here to see if we again can get some of that moisture trying to at least work its way up. We don't want any type of hurricanes, but we will take at least some decent moisture chances for parts of the Gulf states. Then going up further up to the north, or in the heart of the Ag Belt there, across parts of the Central Plains, up across Iowa, Minnesota, even Wisconsin there. Further again, seeing more dry weather continuing to linger on, and unfortunately, it looks like we're going to be dealing with this dry pattern as we wrap up August and head on into the first full weekend of September. Looking at our jet stream here on this Friday, that heat dome, well, it's going to begin to track its way back off towards the west, down across the Four Corners over towards the Rockies. Meanwhile, we're going to be watching a nice trough beginning to develop towards this weekend and the start of next week. That's going to bring some much cooler weather for parts of the Great Lakes, Midwest, and parts of the New England coastline, but it's going to be a toasty one off towards the west. That's a look around the country. Let's take a look at your Ag Day select cities after we take a look at your temperatures for this afternoon and into tomorrow morning, where again we've got that pleasant weather on the way. Going over to Burbank, some morning clouds, afternoon sun, high 79 degrees. Going over to Walsenburg, thunderstorms around 80 degrees out there. And then going over to Sunnyside, Washington, cloudy, high 84 degrees.
Product many farmers use to fight weeds in corn is back in the spotlight. We're talking about atrazine. Earlier this summer, we told you atrazine was getting its EPA registration revised. The president of the National Corn Growers Association this week defending the weed-fighting product before an EPA scientific advisory panel, saying that it's an important tool in the hands of U.S. corn growers, adding it helps growers effectively adopt conservation practices while managing those destructive weeds. The EPA is looking into the effects of atrazine on aquatic plants, the agency expecting to receive a report from the scientific advisory panel in late November. This year looks to be one for the record books when it comes to potato exports. Potatoes USA says exports from July of last year to this past June reached a record value of $2.2 billion. Now that's up more than 19% from the previous period. Export volume also increased nearly 4% to 3.3 million metric tons. The organization, which represents U.S. growers and importers, says the increase in exports was led by dehydrated potatoes and chips. Mexico, now the largest potato export market, followed by Canada and Japan. Overall, about 20% of U.S. potatoes are exported. Nothing goes better on a baked potato than butter. We'll meet a Minnesota teen about to be memorialized in butter after being named the cream of the crop. It's Princess K of the Milky Way next.
Your next piece of equipment is on MachineryPete.com. Search equipment from dealerships across the country to find what you're looking for. Only on MachineryPete.com. Closed captioning on Ag Day is brought to you by BASF, helping you do the biggest job on Earth.
Well, the Pro Farmer Crop Tour is looking to crown one state as top yield producer this year. One person in Minnesota received a real crown this week, earning one of the most coveted honors in dairy. Yes, you're looking at the new Princess K of the Milky Way. Emma Kubal is a 19-year-old college student from Waterville, Minnesota. She will serve as the official Goodwill Ambassador for the 1,850 Minnesota dairy farm families. Now, Emma will work to bring dairy to life through conversations, classroom visits, and several speaking engagements about the benefits of dairy and dairy producers in the state. 10 county dairy princesses from across the state competed for the title. Emma's first official duty will be to sit in a rotating cooler at the Minnesota State Fairgrounds to have her likeness sculpted into a 90-pound block of butter, along with the other finalists. After the sculptures are done being on display at the fair, the princesses will get to keep them. Now, how cool is that? Congratulations, Emma. And that's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clint Griffiths. Have a great day. Farm.